Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to our last reading from Book 4. You've completed 4 books, and I hope that makes you feel like you are getting somewhere. It is a longer reading today, so I want to go ahead and get started. We are reading from Book 4, Chapter 16, on page 87. When I was only about 20 years of age, Aristotle's book on the 10 categories came into my hands. Whenever my teacher at Carthage and others who were reputed to be scholars mentioned this book, their cheeks would swell with self-importance, so that the title alone was enough to make me stand agape, as though I were poised over some wonderful divine mystery. I managed to read it and understand it without help, though I now ask myself what advantage I gained from doing so. Other people told me that they had understood it only with difficulty, after the most learned masters had not only explained it to them, but also illustrated it with a wealth of diagrams. But when I discussed it with them, I found that they could tell me no more about it than I already discovered by reading it on my own. The meaning of the book seemed clear enough to me. It defined substance, such as man, and its attributes. For instance, a man has a certain shape. This is quality. He has height, measured in feet, which is quantity. He has relation to other men. For example, he is another man's brother. You may say where he is and when he was born, or describe his position as standing or sitting. You may name his possessions by saying that he has shoes or carries arms. You may define what he does and what is done to him. I have mentioned these examples, but there are countless others, all falling into these 9 categories, or the main category of substance. What profit did this study bring me? None. In fact, it made difficulties for me because I thought that everything that existed could be reduced to these 10 categories, and I therefore attempted to understand you, my God, in all your wonderful, immutable simplicity, in these same terms, as though you too were substance. And greatness and beauty were your attributes in the same way that a body has attributes by which it is defined. But your greatness and beauty are your own self, whereas a body is not great or beautiful simply because it is a body. It would still be a body even if it were less great or less beautiful. My conception of you was quite untrue, a mere falsehood. It was a fiction based on my own wretched state, not the firm foundation of your bliss. It was your command that the ground should yield me thorns and thistles, and that I should earn my bread with the sweat of my brow. And your word was accomplished in me. I read and understood by myself all the books that I could find on the so-called liberal arts, for in those days I was a good-for-nothing and a slave to sordid ambitions. But what advantage did I gain from them? I read them with pleasure, but I did not know the real source of such true and certain facts as they contained. I had my back to the light, and my face was turned towards the things which it illumined, so that my eyes, by which I saw the things which stood in the light, were themselves in darkness. Without great difficulty and without need of a teacher, I understood all that I read on the arts of rhetoric and logic, on geometry, music, and mathematics. You know this, O Lord my God, because if a man is quick to understand and his perception is keen, he has these gifts from you. But since I made no offering of them to you, it did me more harm than good to struggle to keep in my own power so large a part of what you had given to me, and instead of preserving my strength for you, to leave you and go to a far country to squander your gifts on loves that sold themselves for money. For what good to me was my ability if I did not use it well? And ability I had, for until I tried to instruct others, I did not realize that these subjects are very difficult to master, even for pupils who are studious and intelligent. And a student who could follow my instruction without faltering was reckoned a very fine scholar. But what value did I gain from my reading as long as I thought that you, Lord God, who are the truth, were a bright, unbounded body, and I a small piece broken from it? What utter distortion of the truth! Yet this was my belief, and I do not now blush to acknowledge, my God, the mercies you have shown to me, nor to call you to my aid, just as in those days I did not blush to declare my blasphemies aloud and snarl at you like a dog. What then was the value to me of my intelligence, which could take these subjects in its stride, and all those books with their tangled problems, which I unraveled without the help of any human tutor, when in the doctrine of your love I was lost in the most hideous error and the vilest sacrilege? And was it so great a drawback to your faithful children that they were slower than I to understand such things? For they did not forsake you, but grew like fledglings in the safe nest of your church, nourishing the wings of charity on the food of the faith that would save them. O Lord our God, let the shelter of your wings give us hope. Protect us and uphold us. You will be the support that upholds us from childhood till the hair on our heads is gray. When you are our strength, we are strong. But when our strength is our own, we are weak. In you our good abides forever, and when we turn away from it, we turn to evil. Let us come home at last to you, O Lord, for fear that we be lost. For in you our good abides, and it has no blemish, since it is yourself. Nor do we fear that there is no home to which we can return. We fell from it, but our home is your eternity, and it does not fall because we are away. I am so sorry for all the wind in the background. It has just been terribly windy here at Edwards for the past several days. There is just no way to get around it. So sorry for all the wind. That's just how it is here at Edwards. I've told this story many times, so most of you know that I had a college friend become an atheist years after college. She had been raised in a kooky Pentecostal church growing up, and through college she was still a Christian, though she struggled with a lot of the practices she was forced to endure as a kid in her church. And they were weird, let me tell you. I heard all her stories. Well, not too long after I converted to Catholicism, she became an atheist. And where I was on fire to share the gospel, she was on fire to evangelize people to atheism. She specifically hated Catholicism, or so she thought, and so she would often share wild, outlandish, erroneous memes on Facebook. And they were all pretty easy to debunk, and because I love a good argument, I engaged. At one point in all our back and forth, she encouraged me to read Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. And if you don't know who Richard Dawkins is, he is an English professor of biology, and he wrote a book called The God Delusion. He's an atheist, and he's one of the early 2000 atheists that became really popular around that time. He's kind of dropped off now because his arguments are so bad, but that's who he is. And she told me, oh, he is so smart, so witty, and his book had thoroughly convinced her that religion, all religions, were bogus. So I said I would read it if she would read a book of mine. I held up my end of the bargain. She did not hold up her end of the bargain. But I checked out the book and I started reading. I wanted to be able to understand where she was coming from, and I wanted to see what his arguments were that really convinced her so that I could speak more intelligently to what she threw at me. Now, Richard Dawkins, he has a PhD in biology. He's a smart guy, very intelligent, but his arguments against religion, specifically Christianity, are weak tea. He has a high intellect given to him by God, but he is ignorant on theology. Woefully so. St. Augustine says of himself here today, quote, I had my back to the light, and my face was turned towards the things which it illumined, so that my eyes, by which I saw the things which stood in the light, were themselves in the darkness. Unquote. Now, this is true of Dawkins as well. Just like Augustine, Dawkins has the same materialist view of God. For Dawkins, God is a quote unquote bearded dude in the sky, a quote unquote superhuman designer. He is, if he exists, just one more created being within the created world. How wrong he is. He just doesn't get it. And therefore, all his arguments about God kind of fall flat. The most intelligent person in the world can be wrong about God. What often happens is that they think that their high intelligence makes them smart in every department, and they pridefully think that they know all. Only a humble heart, whether super intelligent or not, can even begin to hope to grasp at the truth about God. Without humility, we will always fall short. With that, we finish Book 4. I will see you soon for the start of Book 5, but until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.